Some progress with the Falk Overtype. I've just taken the boiler, the base and the firebox out of the vinegar bath. Obviously I've separated the firebox from the base. And there's some interesting reveals there. I'm now fairly certain that the paint on the base was not the original because the vinegar literally took it all off. Now, if that was original paint on the base, the vinegar wouldn't have touched it. I've worked on many vintage German model steam engines, and the paint is normally, if it's original, it's normally very good. So I think at some point in time this has been repainted and not primed or anything. So I've still got to finish cleaning this up. I'll use the brass wire wheel on this and the firebox. They'll be repainted. I'm not really sure what colour to do this. I think I'll probably go for a dark red, because a lot of the old German model steam engines, they had a dark sort of burgundy type red base. So I think I might go for that. Firebox will be black obviously, and I'll paint the boiler support and the chimney same colours. I've cleaned everything else up. We did some work on the whistle. I made a little tiny collar to go on the end of the valve there, and it now works. And I also soaked it in vinegar because there was a lot of scale on the whistle. I've cleaned all that out, and so it now works, so that's great. Yeah, everything else is cleaned up quite nicely. So like I said, a final cleaning on the base and the firebox ready for repainting, and obviously the boiler needs to be further cleaned, but yeah, it's coming along nicely. Well, I've got the little Josef Falk Overtype partially reassembled, but while I'm at this stage, I'm waiting for the paint. I've sprayed the base and the flow wheel. I'm waiting for the paint to dry on those, so I can't get it all back together yet. But while I'm at this stage, I thought you might be interested to have a look at the cylinder and the valve chest and how it all works, because it's quite fascinating really. So I've got the cylinder cover off, as you can see. Close in on that. Yeah, so there you go. This is the cylinder. The cylinder is actually quite small. Obviously the cylinder cover is quite large, but that is the cylinder there. This is the valve chest here, and the two are sealed by a gasket. Now, the gasket was, when I took it apart, the gasket was damaged, so I had to make a new one, and I've made a new one, but unfortunately it's not working. It's leaking. You need a really good seal between the cylinder and the valve chest, and it's leaking here, where you see there's the gasket sticking out there. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make I've got plenty of gasket material in all different thicknesses. I'm going to make a slightly thicker one, and hopefully that will allow it to seal up. But what I'll do is I'll take the cylinder off of the valve chest, and you can see exactly how it works. Okay, so here we've got the cylinder. Now this is the rear steam port. This puts steam or air into the cylinder at the back of the piston. This is the front steam port, and this puts air or steam into the cylinder in front of the piston. The middle one is the exhaust port. Now, this tiny weeny little bit of tin here, that is the slide valve, and I'll show you how it works. Now, to give you an idea of just how small that is, there's my finger. So I think you can see it's absolutely tiny. And this is the face that presses against the port face on the cylinder. Okay, so I've got the little slide valve in place. Now, when it is in this position, it allows steam to go in, steam or air to go into this port and flood this end of the cylinder, which will push the conrod out that way. Now, the little indentation in the slide valve is allowing any steam or air that's in this end of the cylinder to come out through the port, through this little indentation here, and then out through the exhaust port. Now, there's a little rod, I'll show you that in a minute, in the valve chest that connects to this valve using this little slot at the end. But basically what happens is, as that rod moves in and out, this will then move from here to here, uncovering that port, allowing steam or air to go into the front and push the piston that way, whilst allowing any steam or air that's in this end to come out and go out through the exhaust port. So that's basically how it operates. So here's the slide valve in the valve chest, and this moves. It doesn't have to move very far, just a little tiny bit like that, back and forth. So for instance, in that position, this part of the indentation is lined up with the exhaust port, and this part is lined up with the port that is at the rear of the cylinder. And that's basically how it operates. Now, this little slide valve is actually free to move up and down. It's only engaged in a slot on the actual valve rod there, and it's free to move in this plane up and down, and it relies on the pressure of the air and the steam coming in to push this against the port face on the cylinder. So that's why, and obviously in order for that to actually work, you've got to have a really good seal around this surface and the cylinder port face. Well, here it is partially back together. This is not the actual flywheel, this is an old Mammoth flywheel that I'm using temporarily. The actual flywheel is being painted at the moment, and it's not straight because it's the bore is much larger on the flywheel than the actual crankshaft, so I've got some shim in there so it runs unevenly, but it's good enough to test it with. I'll tell you what we'll do, let's stick the chimney on, make it look nice. I've machined up a little aluminium cap for the chimney because I think that's exactly what it would have had originally. There we go. And let's see if we can get it running. Yep, runs very nicely. That's about 12 psi. Increase it a bit. That's about 10 psi. Runs absolutely fine. So I need to put it all back together, and we can get it steamed up. So the little Falk Overtype is back together, and I think it's looking quite nice. As I said, I wasn't sure what colour the base should be, but that sort of dark burgundy red seems to go quite nicely with these little engines. Now, this was not without dramas. I'll let it come round and we'll close in and have a look. While I was reassembling this, I'd got it all ready to go back together with the original flywheel. I was just gently pressing it onto the crankshaft, and basically the crankshaft folded. It just bent up. Basically where the U-bend is in the middle, that the conrod attaches to, right there it just folded and basically broke in half. I just thought, oh my god, what am I going to do about this? So yeah, well, I'll show you what I did. Yeah, so it snapped right there, and when I had a close look at it, what had happened, for some unknown reason, the conrod had actually worn a groove into the crankshaft, so it got quite thin at the pivot point just there. Now the conrod is actually brass as far as I can tell, so you wouldn't think it would wear the steel, but it did, and that's where it snapped. So I thought, oh god, I'm scratching my head, what am I going to do, make a new crankshaft and all this kind of stuff. And then it suddenly occurred to me, well, hang on a minute, this is mild steel rod here and it's only a very small bit, maybe I could braze it back together. Now, all my brazing skills I learned from watching Rob over on the Zanudu channel, watching his brazing videos, and I've got exactly the same bullfinch brazing torch that he's got. So you know, in theory, this is a very small amount of metal. It should braze up fairly easily. So trying to work out where holding it. In the end, I used my mini vise to hold both ends of the crankshaft in alignment and together. Put some fire bricks around it, and yeah, it brazed up beautifully. It really did. It was an amazing job. The braze flowed really well on it. Now, I don't know how long this is going to last. It feels pretty strong. You know, obviously I filed the excess off, and it's, you know, it's in there now, and it runs fine. So yeah, we're just going to have to wait and see on that. But for the time being, anyway, it seems to have fixed it. Well, there's certainly a lot of water coming out of it. Ah, yes, we're off. Amazing. Excellent. Looks like I've overfilled it. What a surprise. There's no level plug or sight glass on this, so basically I filled it up to the level of the safety valve and then just emptied a little bit out, but obviously that's still too much. But it is running. And certainly for the time being anyway, my current crankshaft repair appears to be holding. Well, after all the work that went into this and the little disaster that we had with the crankshaft, I'm well pleased with that. Yes, that's running very nicely. Let's close up on that. And very quietly too. Wow, let's see if the whistle works. Well, I'd call that a success. At least it's got a valve actuating arm on it now, which it didn't have before, so. Yes, well anyway, I'm quite pleased with this. As I said, there's quite a lot of work involved with this one, but it's turned out very nice and it runs a treat. So, must remember not to put too much water in the boiler. It's much better now. It's stopped, you know, peeing water out all over the place. Running very well. Well, I think that's about it for the little Josef Falk Overtype. As always, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. Cheers.